The International Clarinet Association is thrilled that you've joined us here in Denver for Clarinet Fest 2023, where we are celebrating a remarkable 50 years of our great association. This project that you are about to see is a reflection of the history of the ICA and all of its changes throughout the years, told through the eyes of those that brought us to where we are today. We hope that you enjoy this special presentation, and we thank you for being a part of our 50th anniversary celebration.
We have never met, but I'm so delighted to meet you finally because you're the guy who started it all.
Many moons ago.
So the whole thing started in Denver. And what was the, I mean, it was really part of your load at one time to do this, wasn't it?
Yeah, they gave me a fourth of my load to do that in the summer, or maybe a fourth of my pay or something like that.
Had you come to one of those national clarinet clinics before you were
yeah, they flew me in the year before I started. They flew me in to the 1967 National Clarinet Clinic, and it was held in a science laboratory,
yeah,
with the big fixture in the middle of the somewhat looking stage. And I remember the first time I had Harold Wright there. I called him for the second year, and he said, Ray, build me an auditorium and a stage. And it just so happened that the university built the new auditorium that we had it in, that you guys went to.
So what do you think of this thing you started and now has over 4,000 members? And
man, I just marvel at it. It's amazing. I mean, you know, that meeting that we had when we formed, or I at least just suggested, here's what we ought to do. Man, we're missing the boat. Even the tubists have an organization. You know, their acronym was TUBA, the United Brotherhood of whatever. And we met after the meeting that day, and there were maybe 20 to 30 people. I said, if you're interested, show up in the back and we'll meet in this little room and talk about it. That's all I said. We'll talk about it, but I think we're missing the boat. Here's what we could do. We could have a paper, we could have members, blah, 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 the whole thing. And we talked for about 20 minutes, and Stanek finally said, let's elect the officers and get this thing going. We got to go eat. So that's what they did.
That's when you became president, right?
Yeah, I was the last one that they suggested, and somebody said, I don't know how that works, end of suggestions or nominations, elect by proclamation or something like that. So I was the only candidate. But there we were. Everybody split right after that immediately. And the four of us were down there like, what the hell do we do now?
Good afternoon. My name is Chuck West. I was president of the ICA in 1988 through 90, I guess. Introducing to my right, Alan Stanek, who was president after. I was the earliest, I think. Alan Stanek, Keith Coons, Bob Spring, John Chipola, Gary Whitman, and Lee Livengood. I was the president when there was Clarinet Work International and International Clarinet Society. And we had a joint conference, and I needed to be sure that everybody's needs were met. There were people who liked the word Clarinet Work, Clarinet Fest, others who liked Clarinet Congress, Clarinet Society. So we decided to call it Clarinet Fest. And so that was kind of the first time that got used. But when we brought the two organizations together, we had to kind of invent an administrative structure that would work for everybody. We had membership coordinator. We didn't have the secretary who kept track of the membership. We had a membership coordinator, and of course we kept Jim Gillespie as editor of the magazine. I think that was probably the biggest thing.
It was either, and maybe Lee can confirm the dates, it was either the last half of 2007 or January of 2008. We always had a winter meeting, that tradition. So we met in Fort Worth and started the meeting, but I said, before we get into a lot of agenda items, I have one agenda item in particular that I've had a lot of requests for, and I need to have immediate input on this. And the question is, should ICA be a member of an up-and-coming social platform called Facebook? And I put it to the board like that, and they said, Whitman, this is a no-brainer. Of course we have to do this. End of discussion. And the rest of it is history, of course, from there on now. But I think ICA turned a corner.
That was a terrific step into the present,
Yes.
into the modern era.
It was. Mm-hmm.
I think I started a little bit ahead of Gary with being president-elect and president. And at that time, I think the organization was really starting to get its business operations more solidified. I know when I first came on, we hired a full-time executive director, and that has really progressed a lot with the staff that we have now and all of the different operations that are possible. But we're coming from, and probably with you guys, especially Chuck and Alan, where it was a lot of volunteer stuff, and moving still with a lot of the officers obviously volunteer, but having more staff and trying to organize the operations was, I know, something that had happened a lot during the time that I was involved on the board.
As we know, the ICA has most often had conferences and festivals on college campuses. And that has worked well in so many cases. And it's really exposed people to different parts of the country and been able to draw people and take advantage of some good musical facilities in different campuses. But also the board wanted to experiment with having a conference at a hotel or conference center location. And this was done in Atlanta back sometime before then, which was pretty successful. And so I knew that if it was going to be in Orlando, it would perhaps draw a lot of people because a lot of people like to come to Orlando. But we certainly did not have facilities to host it on my campus. However, we could put it in a hotel and have that experiment with the location and facilities there in the hotel. And, excuse me, so we tried that, and I think it worked pretty well. Everybody seemed to like having all those facilities under one roof, with the sleeping rooms and the presentation rooms and the exhibits and food all there together.
Bob, you did yours on your campus.
Yeah,
What year was that?
1995, and it was right after an extremely successful one in Chicago, and we worked really hard, and I only had 9 months to prepare. It was Jerry Arante, who I was playing a concert near him in Virginia, and that night he said, well, I'll go out get a drink afterward. And he bought like 2 pitchers of beer, and then he said, would you be willing to host the conference next summer? And I said, next summer? And he said, yeah. Well, I had to get approval from the university to do that, and that took a while. And this was a unique experience at that time, because this was one time, it hadn't happened before, when the ICA agreed to take responsibility, financial responsibility, should we lose money. But the ICA also got, I think it was 50% of anything if we made money.
And that was huge, that change, because back in the 80s, it was my gain or my loss.
That's right, yeah.
You know, I mean, it was like, it was all on my back.
And I don't remember our exact numbers anymore. we tried. It was so different then in many ways because we still paid people to play back then, and so you had people on this bidding war. And I remember one person saying, "I want $20 more than this other person is getting," and it was very, very difficult. And the instrument companies were not really doing what they do now, which is help sponsor people or whatever. So that was hard, and I think we probably were. I'd have to look at the numbers again. But cleaning my office, and I actually found all my files, and I think we probably had around the same thing, around the 500 level. But it was a real frightening thing to do that at the time. And the board decided that that at the time that if I was going to do this, and the board was going to take some financial responsibility, they had to have someone guiding me along the way. And it was Howard Klug did a lot of work. Jerry Orante helped too, just to get people and get a program working.
Sure.
But I remember your festival for one reason.
The heat?
It was the hottest place in the world.
I remember that too.
What happened during your administration? 'Cause
I wanted to involve more of the people who weren't there a lot, which is sometimes some of the performers, but also industry people were at the conferences in the exhibit rooms and stuff, but I don't think they felt very much part of the decision-making process, and tried to include them a little more than they were. And hope to get more membership like we all do and all want to do. And more varied membership, meaning college professors, private teachers, performers, industry members, students of all kinds, etc., that kind of thing. And a big one was I wanted to not have to presume that we were going to go to a university for the conferences, because the conferences were getting bigger, and that made it very difficult to find university sites that had the proper facilities. Now, there are still plenty of them, and I wasn't ever suggesting that we don't go to universities if it's a really great site. But on the other hand, I wanted to open up the option of having conferences at conference centers and hotels, so that we weren't bound to a university site, but we could actually choose the sites in the world that we might want to go to, and have kind of a conference that is housed in a great facility that had rooms, exhibit spaces, concert halls in the area, hopefully, conference rooms there, meeting rooms, etc. And we had one of the first of those, I think, was in New Orleans during our conference.
Tell you what came to mind when this project came up. The first main thing, other than meetings, which one wants to forget as soon as possible, the main thing that came up was Asian Rim. I was the representative when I was still president-elect in China for a festival there, and then when I was president in Tokyo, the whole China Japan thing was a thrill.
What led you to take over the editorship in the first place?
Well, Lee Gibson, was my colleague at North Texas. He was the first editor, and he needed a review editor about the second year of his editorship. So he asked me. He had seen that my book on the reference book on the Reed Trio, and I figured I knew something about repertoire or something. I don't know why he chose me, but he asked me to be review editor. So I was review editor for 5 years, and that's how I got involved with the magazine. The things that I would personally most proud of was that series I did on studio clarinet players. Film. That. And the very first one that I Wonder Who the Clarinet Player Was series, on movie scores. And the very first one in the series, I had two of my doctoral students do. So they actually started it. Yeah.
So I was fortunate to be on the board during a time of great transition. I think probably the single greatest accomplishment that the ICA made during my time as president is we had the first conference that was hosted by ICA. That was the financial risk and reward for the conference. Was the first time we did that was in 2004, and of course that was at the University of Maryland, and of course that was also a time of of learning, taking our lumps and learning from mistakes, but also taking advantage of opportunities.
I think at the time, the 92, 94, the country was going through a little bit of a recession. And so a lot of us who made their living teaching lots of kids were a little concerned that the numbers didn't seem to be holding up, particularly not the beginners so much, but the late junior high and high school kids, where the buzzword of the day was go into high tech and get science degrees and medicine and that sort of thing, more than it had been before. So I think we lost numbers. I think it was tougher recruiting at colleges and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, maybe we can do some grassroots building of encouraging kids to stay in the program and stick with the instrument and be there when it came time to go for their college education.
Do you remember what your whole budget was?
What I could carry around in one pocket.
It's been 37 years since I was elected president of Clarinet Work. And I thought about that, and my first reaction was, holy crap, that's like another, it's like another lifetime.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had to go back and get some dates straight, because I know one of the important things that I'm sure you'd like to reflect on is the merger between Clarinet Work and also ICA.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of what we were going to ask you about.
Oh, okay. Well, it's an interesting thing. Is I went back and looked at my Clarinet Work magazines.
Yeah.
This is the one where we did where I did the interview with Jaime Boxman. Labor. But this is the sum total of my Clarinet Work magazine. With the open mind of John Moeller and also myself, we took a vote. I think was preceded by, actually, an interesting thing it was preceded by was a thing which I sent out, actually, which was like a survey to survey the members of Clarinet Work and to survey the members and to see if they really wanted a merger. And the interesting thing was that I got an unusual number of the old timers to respond. And by old timers, I mean George Wallen and Bernard Portnoy. And I mean, these are heavy duty members. And they were saying, it's really time to do this. And, we applaud you in your effort, and please proceed. And so the rest is pretty much history. I think once the membership voted to do this, then the rest was perfunctory. It was just a matter of getting the principals together and signing the documents.
So, I mean, you're the only person that's been president of both of those organizations before they merged.
Yeah, of course, I became very involved with the what became the International Clarinet Association, and I'm honored and very pleased to have been involved from the beginning, and one of the presenters in 1973 in Denver. And it was actually Eddie Daniels who came up with the name Clarinet Work. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say that I was, one of the founders, but one of the, I was in on the early meetings and so forth. And we had some wonderful festivals in Maryland and DC and so on and so forth. But it made no sense. Many of us agreed to duplicate efforts and to have the two organizations. David Hite talked me into becoming president of Clarinet Work. And he said, oh, yeah, I'll do all the work. You just, do it. Of course, it didn't work out that way. And I'm very pleased also that in 1988, as you know, we effected a merger. We met in Des Moines, kind of middle of the country, a neutral territory with John Moeller, Bud Rubin, the fabulous guy, the attorney for the ICA, and Ed Riley, who was president at the time, and Dan Levy, who was the Clarinet Work attorney. And then, it all came together.
For sure, we do know in 1994, which was sometime after Fred's presidency, it was Clarinet Fest in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then we're going to research and see when it was actually copyrighted. But, so there was a discussion evidently between Chuck and Fred about just the name.
Yeah, but Fred, that was a pretty casual discussion, though, wasn't it?
We never took anything ever too seriously.
No, we didn't.
We have with us three very important ladies who've been with the association for years and years. We have Annette Lieben, we have Mary Nickel, we have Kathleen Jones. And these are people that I remember meeting back before a lot of members were even born. And so I'd like to ask Annette, just tell us about your history with this conference and the organization, and your family's history.
It goes back to my mom and dad. And my father was a clarinet player. We had a music store in Kansas City, which they started in 1948. And they heard about this clarinet conference, or whatever you want to call it at that time. It was going on in Denver. It was, I believe, 1970. And they went, my father it was Bob Schott down in Pittsburgh that had been active with it and had talked to my dad and said, you need to go. They went out there and heard the people playing, and somebody said to my mom, can you get that piece of music? I'd sure like to have that piece of music. I thought, yeah, I think I probably can. So the next year, in 1971, she took music. And she had gotten the list of everything that was going to be played. She penned letters to each of the artists that were going to be playing, asked them what they were going to play, and to provide her with that information. She then ordered that music and took it out there and became a vendor. And did it every year after that until through 1982. And in 1983, I had the privilege and the honor of being able to take over for them, and have done the conferences here in the United States since then, and a couple in Europe.
You've been a total fixture and a total asset to the organization. Mary, you worked with Annette some.
I go back to 1963, because I bought my first clarinets from Bob Lieben, her father, and he picked out my college clarinets, and then I took lessons from Bob in the summers while I was in college at the University of Missouri. And then in 1976, I had never heard of the Clarinet Festival, and Bill Jackson was one of my students, and I came with him and his family out here. Oh, actually in Denver. I think I'm in Denver. And that's when I met you, Chuck, in 1976. And I've been going ever since. And then I helped Annette Lieben, her mother, do all the hosting for the parties after the big soloist was concert. And so I did that, and then her parents took me to Toronto, and they took me to Paris, and I went with them. And also, I'm in the Colorado Clarinet Choir, and we performed in London, and I think that's the first time that you and I have been to one together. And we went to see Cats, and had a little too much fish and chips and stuff. But
what goes along with it?
We've been like sisters, and her parents treated me like one of their own. And so Kathleen too. We've known each other for years. I think that's...
And Kathy, I remember meeting you back when Leon Rushinoff had some master classes that were somehow, at least there was a contiguity of some sort between the Clarinet Congress and his master classes. But I met you at one of those, and I think Jerry Arante was there, and it was. How did you get involved in it?
I think my first conference was '76 in Denver, and I'd heard about it. I don't know how. It was the end of my first year on my one-year job in Puerto Rico.
That one-year job lasted how long? How long did that one-year?
I just retired from 42 years in the principal chair of the Puerto Rico Symphony, so my one-year job. Yeah, it's been a few years, but I heard about it and I went out, and I remember meeting these lovely people, Bob and Annette Liven, who were so kind and so efficient, and she kept saying to me, "You have to meet my daughter, Shugs. You'll really like my daughter."
And good nickname.
Shugs, yeah. And when I met her, it was just like part of one family. And I think Mom and Dad Liven were so important in the beginning of the Clarinet Festivals. They brought everybody together with a smile and an efficient, I can get that for you. Oh, we'll mail it to you. It just felt like a family. And so I became kind of sisters with these guys, and the International Clarinet Association to me is friendly. It's friends, it's people. There's lots to buy, and there are lots of concerts, but it's just a wonderful group of people. And I think it started.
It's a family. It's a family. It's a family idea, and I hope it stays that way.
People love the organization. They love clarinet. They want to work together. I think Denise and Mitch all did so well. They now have committees. They have all these. They have all these days where because of COVID, and now that we have the nice website, they can do these weekend days for amateurs, for professionals, and I think everybody's more involved. I would just like to see everybody who plays the clarinet be a member, because there's so much value in it, and that's really what I'd like to see. And I think we're it's on a good path, a good trajectory right now.
Probably the most challenging aspect of my presidency was dealing with the pandemic, and I think that the ICA has come out of the pandemic very well. The association is in great hands with the current board. I just want to continue to see an expansion of all of the initiatives that sort of have been implemented in the last few years. Internationalization, finding great international locations for festivals. That's been a great challenge over the last few years, with having to cancel 2 Clarinet Fests and to find suitable locations and to be able, to have site visits. We canceled half a dozen site visits when I was president. We had Jessica got us plane tickets and hotel reservations and train tickets, et cetera, and everything had to be canceled because of the pandemic. So I'm excited to see where the current board is going to take us in the next few years.
My good friend Mitch Estrin and I did our best to lead the ICA through the unknown waters of a global pandemic. My initial year as president, we hosted the first ever virtual Clarinet Fest led by Mary Druin and her team. And my second year, our first meeting in person in 2 years, when Clarinet Fest 2022 met in Reno, hosted by Christy Banks. What a beautiful thing to see so many smiling faces as people reconnected again after 2 years of computer screens. The things that I'm most proud of that the board and EDO accomplished during my presidency was the increased focus on building the international membership and the development of committees to bring the membership into a more active and engaged role in helping to lead the direction of the organization. So many good things have come from the change as members have brought their passion, energy, and creativity to increase our outreach to members of all ages and abilities, with such wonderful offerings happening from free online events to presentations at Clarinet Fest. We have such an incredibly talented membership, and I've loved seeing such great content being put out into the world. All in all, I was proud of our organization for making the best out of the difficulties of the pandemic and being flexible enough to try some new ways of doing things. When we come together, it has always been amazing what we're able to accomplish as an organization.
On our 50th anniversary, we celebrate all the great things we have accomplished and look forward to all that is to come. As the current president of the International Clarinet Association, I want to thank several groups of people who have been an essential part of our organization's journey and success. First, I am eternally grateful for the leadership, dedication, and passion our past presidents have bestowed upon the ICA these past 50 years. Thank you for serving as a role model for all of us who will continue the valuable work you laid before us. To our staff who have steadfastly served the ICA behind the scenes all these years, thank you for your commitment and excellent work that you have done on behalf of the ICA. Thank you to all who have worked as committee members, chairs, competition coordinators, and in various other capacities on behalf of our organization. I also thank our ICA sponsors, exhibitors, and advertisers whose support is always deeply appreciated. Finally, to our members, you have been an essential part of our organization's journey and success. The ICA is eternally grateful to you all. And now I ask, what dreams might you have for the ICA for our next 50 years? I invite you all to dream big and to continue to be a part of our conversations. Most of all, remember, together, we are the ICA.